In high-entropy political environments, the traditional method of control was kinetic coercion, the blunt, direct application of physical force. Relying on overt physical force is economically inefficient and generates massive systemic resistance, rendering it an obsolete strategy for maintaining long-term stability. The widely accepted alternative is transparent governance, an architecture built on the premise that a leader's rhetoric must strictly align with their actions. To a systems architect, this transparency is a profound strategic liability. Because actions must match rhetoric perfectly, the system is inherently brittle. A single exposed maneuver or failed strategy creates a single point of failure that threatens to collapse the entire hierarchy. Since transparency leaves an entire power structure vulnerable to a single mistake, survival in a zero-sum environment requires a more resilient architectural approach. Modern power structures have evolved toward teleological governance, a method designed specifically to stabilize social architectures under extreme pressure. This evolution centers on the Janus Protocol, a strategic apparatus that requires leadership to inhabit two simultaneous contradictory personas. The protocol uses deliberate duplicity to decouple a leader's public reputation from their strategic maneuvers. Our goal is to map the specific circuitry of this protocol to observe exactly how absolute systemic dominance is maintained. Analyzing orchestrated contradiction requires stripping away moralizing judgments to view it strictly as a mechanical technology for surviving the game. To satisfy divergent requirements, the system necessitates the structural bifurcation of leadership. The outer shell, the public mask, is defined by performative benevolence directed at the populace. It generates social legitimacy, securing a reservoir of moral capital. The private face functions as the hidden core, operating on cold calculation geared toward tacticians. It focuses exclusively on amoral acquisition of influence for power preservation. The interaction between these two modules creates the moral insulator effect. The private face actively expends the moral capital generated by the public mask to fuel and shield its own operations. This mechanism allows elites to publicly champion systemic constraints while privately bypassing them without any structural hindrance. The tension between these opposing faces functions as a deliberate design feature, providing the kinetic energy required to power the broader hierarchy. Orchestrated contradiction generates a highly engineered energy source, friction. We measure this energy by tracking the delta, the widening gap between stated moral goals on the y-axis and actual clinical outcomes on the x-axis. The hierarchy widens this delta to harvest public energy. Objective 1 is public exhaustion. The labor required to navigate this distance drains the citizenry's energy. Harvesting this exhaustion renders organized structural dissent mathematically and physically difficult to maintain. Objective 2 is cognitive dissonance. The resulting public confusion establishes a defensive perimeter, preventing localized scrutiny of the elite's true intentions. Objective 3, the operational blank check. While the public is preoccupied with the political theater, the private face is granted total freedom of movement. Mapping this delta reveals how public hypocrisy is actively weaponized to transform a perceived vulnerability into a stabilized form of control. The superior resilience of the Janus Protocol becomes evident when comparing it to transparent governance during a systemic stress test. A leader who maintains moral consistency presents a predictable and easily exploitable profile for opponents in a competitive zero-sum environment. The Janus Protocol counters this via the sacrificial shield. When public outrage strikes, the transparent system shatters. But in the redundant system, the outer public mask absorbs the impact. The hierarchy treats the compromised mask as disposable, discarding it. The core then generates a new moral posture, continuing uninterrupted. This ability to discard a public identity guarantees operational continuity, proving that moral consistency is a lethal strategic error in the game. The system relies on three procedural pillars that utilize paradox as a stabilizing force. Pillar 1, systemic stabilization absorbs shocks. Pillar 2, asymmetry obscures strategic intent. Pillar 3, performative inhabitation requires conviction. Perfect execution leads to the terminal, most dangerous stage, naturalization. Deliberate duplicity merges with the environment, becoming completely invisible and is accepted as reality. Naturalization renders the architecture unhackable, as outside observers lose the conceptual vocabulary required to even identify the manipulation. Within the zero-sum arena of the game, power remains a finite resource where competition is absolute. Absolute dominance in this environment is never achieved through transparent governance or ideological consistency. Entrenched hierarchies survive solely through the masterful orchestration of contradiction and modular redundancy. To understand modern power, the institutional architect must move beyond the surface of political theater. We must stop viewing hypocrisy as a sign of failure and begin analyzing it as a functioning machine. The precise analytical action required is to map the friction. This involves calculating the delta between a system's stated altruistic rhetoric and its clinical, amoral outcomes. Deconstructing these dual personas completely breaks through the naturalization effect, revealing the true mechanical blueprint of systemic dominance.